I'm recording.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher krishnan b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. Barev na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'fidu u'fi Amcha Beit Yisrael, v'niyeh anachnu v'tzetzenu v'tzetzei Amcha Beit Yisrael, kulanu yodei shemecha v'lomdei Toratecha lishma, Baruch atah Adonai melamed Torah le'amu Yisrael.
Amen.
Right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabanu mikol amim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Right. Okay. So let's go straight into the Mishnah. I'm going to ask you guys just in the meantime, unless you have any questions, to mute yourself. In fact, I can mute you guys, just because I'm hearing a lot of background noise at the moment. So I'm muting you all. Okay. You can unmute yourself whenever there's a question. All right. We're going to begin with the Mishnah Brura and Shulchan Aruch. They're both from section 179. Okay? So this is by Rabbi Daniel Brody, which is Rabbi Gary Brody's brother. Okay, so we're discussing the issue of stopping to eat. Stops the brocha. Okay? The brocha that one makes before one eats are alive, and they continue working until the person makes a clear distinction or in terms of either an action or a decision to end eating. At that point, it's considered a hefsek diet, an interruption of his mindset away from the brochas, and they no longer cover what he eats. In such a case, one might consider whether it is permitted to eat or drink at all. And if yes, then does one make another brocha or should one bench immediately? Okay, so what we're saying here is as follows, is that you either make a clear decision that you're full and that your eating has come to an end, or you take a specific course of action to indicate that. So we're going to discuss a few different ways to end a meal and the impact. Some are objective conclusions to the meal regardless of intent. In other words, sometimes there's an action you do that ends the meal, and others are subjective and dependent on the situation. So, my machronim, which is your, when you basically put the water on your fingers just before you're going to bench. They did that because during the temple times, they used sodium bromide to preserve the meat. And that it was the same as sticking your head in the Dead Sea. If you've got those in your eyes, it was horrific. It was a great preservative. And from then, we've developed the minhag of doing marei machronim, which you take your fingertips and you wash them with water. Obviously, there's no brocha. So doing marei machronim, washing one's hand before bikat hamazon, is a very strong end to a meal. Ideally, one must not eat or drink at all after doing marei machronim. And if one does happen to eat or drink after marei machronim, one has to make a new brocha beforehand, as he has interrupted his earlier brocha. Furthermore, he must do marei machronim again after eating. So what you'll find is that often that the only time they bring out marei machronim on Shabbos is after dessert has been served, just before benching. There's hardly a hefsek, a delay between the two. Okay, so however, this is only in regard to eating or drinking after marei machronim, but one is not allowed to speak, nor do any other activity at all, marei machronim. So just like before you vas and you do hamotzi, so too when you do marei machronim, you should bench immediately afterwards. There shouldn't be a discussion or any sort of interaction. And in the next shiur, please God, we'll discuss other ways that we can end the meal, either by a cognitive decision or an action which terminates the original brocha, which comes to the conclusion. So guys, I hope that's been helpful. I think every day to do halacha has been quite handy. I don't know what you guys think. All right. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to just share my screen a second. All right. Okay. Right. Now, we are about to hit 14b, but before we hit 14b, we ended on the sentence on 14a4 that said, Rach Nachman bar Yitzchak said, and what did he say? This is how we ended the previous page. The Brisa teaches 3 rules which apply variously in 4 places. So what does he mean by this? He basically said that in terms of the 4th rule, let's just go there a sec, point by point. Guys, are you seeing my screen with the 4 rules here? Just say
Yes.
Okay. So basically it looked like 4 separate rules, but there were 3. So again, in the property of only the victim, one is liable for everything. Fine. In the property of only the damager, one is exempt for everything. That's clear. In the property of the victim and damager, a joint property, one is exempt for Shane and Regel and liable for Keren and its Tordos. A Tam pays half damage and a Muad pays full damage. Now, this isn't the Gemara. This is quoting Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Rav Chisda disagrees. And the 4th statement is in property not of the victim and damager, such as the yard that is not of both of them. In this case, we learned it's of the damaged party. One is liable for Shane and Regel. For Keren and its Tordos, a Tam pays half damage and a Muad pays full damages. So what he's actually saying here, Rav Nachman ben Yitzchak, is he's just saying that it looks like there are 4 rules, but there are 3. Why are there 3 rules? Because if you want to say in the property not of the victim and the damager, what did we learn? That is the damaged party or the victim's property, and you're liable for Shane and Regel, right? How does that differ from in the property of only the victim, one is liable for everything? It's exactly the same. And that's what he's saying. Does that make sense, guys? We can end off on that particular 14a. But that makes clear sense to me. Any objections?
Not for me.
Okay, Gavin? Kevin? Guys?
No objection. Perfect.
All right. So that's fine. So what he's saying is it's just a repetition. There are 4 circumstances, but they're actually 3 opinions. So in other words, the Brisa speaks of 4 rules because there are only 2 types of jointly owned yards. So what did we say they are? Primarily the 2 different cases where there's either animals or produce in the field. So in other words, the damager and the victim, let's call it, are both only allowed to have produce, and the damager puts an ox in there, at which case he's liable, or a case where they're both allowed to have oxen, in which case he's exempt for Shane and Regel, according to Rav Shimon ben Elazar and Rav Elazar, and in a case where the damaged party has a right to bring produce, at which if the damager creates Shane and Regel sort of damage, he is liable. As far as that's concerned, that's according to Rav Chisda and not according to Rav Elazar, but according to Shimon ben Elazar, he is liable. All right, good. We're now on to the next section, and that section is 14b. Right. Let me just go to that page while I'm sharing, Bava Kamma 14b. Now, I'd like Kevin to read the Mishnah. Kevin? Kev? Guys, I'm having
Okay, unmute. Okay, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Up to use the volume there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. It's wonderful. I can hear you.
Okay. The determination of payment of damages is made by monetary appraisal. One pays with items worth money. This halacha applies to 4 reports. And it is based upon the testimony of witnesses who are women, that is, men who are not Canaanite slaves, and who are members of the covenant, that is, Jews. And women are included in the halachot of damages in the same way as men. when both the injured party and the one liable for the damage are involved in the payment. Gemara will explicate each of these principles. Can you scroll up?
Okay, you did well. You did excellently. Shkaya.
Is there more to read?
So what we're going to do now is we do what we do in every daf. All right, guys, just mute yourselves because I'm pretty much the voice out back. Okay. So, guys, you're still not on mute. I'm hearing my own voice bounce. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. All right.
Kevin, put yourself on mute. There's
Kevin.
background.
All right. So Kevin read that well. And what we do is we've reached the third Mishnah, which is, this is the 70th shiur. So well done, guys. The 70th, 70. It's quite an achievement. And we've basically hit the third Mishnah. So well done on that achievement. We've done the first, we've done the second, this is the third Mishnah. Now, if you remember from the history of what we do is we analyze the Mishnah and we break it down piece by piece. That's how every Mishnah works, because the Gemara is an explanation of the Mishnah. So the determination of payment of damages is made by monetary appraisal. We're going to discuss that first before we discuss one case with items worth money. Okay? Can you see? All right, guys, by the way, I'm not frustrated at any of you. It's just that there seems to be a technical issue where when you've got your mic off, I'm hearing my own voice. I don't know if it's a signal issue or what. Kevin, well read. Good, man. Thank you very much. So what we're going to do is examine that first statement and then go through it from this point. And the first statement states as follows. Payment is by monetary assessment. So what does this mean? Rav Yehuda says, the Mishnah is saying that this assessment of the amount to be collected should be made solely on the basis of the amount of money lost. Thus, we have learned this general rule in the Mishnah from which the rabbis taught explicitly in the following brisa. Okay? If a cow damaged a garment, or if a garment damaged a cow, we do not say that the cow should go to the damaged party as restitution for the garment regardless of the monetary value of the damage, or that the garment should go for restitution of the cow. Rather, we assess the damage according to its monetary value to determine the amount of restitution. So I'm going to explain to you what this means, guys. Is that you might say, well, isn't this obvious? Don't any of you have a question and say, but surely this is obvious. You assess the damage. Does it not seem obvious?
It does.
It's not obvious because, for example, if you grow up in a law system that is Talmudic based, remember modern law is based on Roman law and English law, which is Saxon law. Where did Saxon come from? Northumberland, Rome, etc. Where did Roman rule steal a lot of its halachic basis from? Talmudic law. They took the best of every culture, the Romans. Okay? So in that particular case, a lot of modern law has to do with Judaic law. So things that you take for granted as obvious and logical, those sort of moral premises are based on thousands of years of error. So just imagine you living in South Africa without getting political. There's either anarchy or draconian state. What's a draconian state? They close everything during lockdown. They don't care if the travel industry goes into and loses billions. They don't care if people lose their homes, and they force you into your homes. Otherwise, you're going to get arrested. That's draconian. Or there's anarchy. They take your tax money and they don't do anything for it, but they don't hurt you either. I never thought anarchy would be better than this, but it seems to be. So in Roman society, there was a certain degree of lawlessness. Let me give you an example. If you rebelled against the state, they would kill you. If you created any problems for the government, they'd kill you. But it was the law of the fittest will survive. People would commit infanticide. I don't know if you know that. If they had too many kids, they'd simply stand on its neck or hold it underwater, the child, because the sensitivity to human life was minimal. You know what many cultures do, even the Eskimo culture, is they leave their old people out in the snow to let them either freeze off the elements or let the wolves tear them to shreds, because they're no longer contributing to society. So the minute you live in a baseless moral society, what actually happens is the weak will not survive. So we take it for granted that they do an exact monetary calculation on losses achieved. But this is not this does not happen in a morally bankrupt society. And what I'm saying is, it is a chiddush that the government would care enough to have a court system to allow you to have civil matters where you could take your fellow to court for robbing you. Because in the old days, it was simply a case of that the strong would take from the weak. What were you going to do about it? This is exactly how the mafia developed. Let me give you an example. Say, for example, Gavin is twice my size and strength. And every time he wanted something, he took something. We learned this, by the way. This is one of the reasons, Gavin, if you remember, we're learning with some Simcha Steinhauer. Kevin? Kevin, are you awake? Okay, this year.
We just lost you for a few seconds there, Damon. You just disappeared.
Can you hear me now, guys?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So what I was going to say is we learned during the period of Noah that what happened is there was absolute lawlessness. If you wanted somebody's wife and you were stronger, you would take her. And it's the same with Sodom and Gomorrah. And if you wanted anybody's financial wealth, or they came into your town and they were poor, you would chop their hands and feet off while they were sleeping, or you would stretch them in a rack and kill them. There was absolute disregard. The strong victimized the weak. So, for example, how did the mafia develop? Say, for example, Gavin's twice my size, okay? And every time he wants something from me, he takes it. Then I'm going to get together with 2 or 3 of my puny friends, and we're going to beat him to death with a baseball bat. Then we're going to get this idea that not only can Gavin not take what he wants, but maybe if 2 or 3 of us get together and I have another 2 or 3 friends, we've got 6 friends now, we go around beating each other with baseball bats because we want things from other people. So in that sort of society, you either have one person that's physically stronger than another, or a case of political power where you've got influence more than the other, or you've got monetary power where you can buy your way out of trouble. Now, most of the third world still works like this, by the way. There's very few countries where there is a justice system. And when we're talking about financial recompense and things that are calculated exactly, you have to look at a legal system that actually cares for society. Because if somebody has wronged you, you can't just have a case where, say, for example, Gavin, you were in an anarchistic state and Kevin smacked your bucky, okay? And then in revenge, you said to him, all right, Kevin, you smacked my bucky, there's X amount of damage, and Gavin's got Arthur in the car, and he says to Arthur, take the bucky from Kevin. He caused me damage. It's mine now. So that's a state of anarchy, but because it's Gavin and Arthur against Kevin, what could Kevin do about it? What could he do about it? Nothing. So it's actually a chiddush to say that monetary compensation is worked out to an exact measurement, because this never happened in olden society. Does that make sense, guys? Right. This is one of the issues that we're dealing with here. All right. So we're dealing with the first issue. A cow entered someone's property and trampled a garment there. Or a cow walking in the public domain tripped on a garment lying there and broke its leg. So how would you think you work out the damages? Kevin, how would you work out the damages?
Work out the damages of, just repeat it for me, please. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So let's just take an issue here. Let's just say we let's just say we have two cows. We haven't dealt with this Karen issue before. So we've always said that cow A smacks cow B, and the damaged cow is worth 300 shekels, right? And the damage for the damaged cow was 100 shekels, okay? And then we say that the attacking cow is, it was a first-time offense, and there's a puny thing and worth 80 shekels. So even though we say that the damage was 100 shekels, we're saying in this particular case that you only have to pay half the body of the animal. So, for example, the damaging animal, it was worth 200 shekels. We have to pay 100 shekels, for example. And then we only owe 80 shekels worth of damage, okay? So what we've always done is we've worked out a case of carrying damage as being one party. My ox hits your ox. And then we say if it's a ton, it's half damages, and we pay from the gufa of the animal. So if it's a puny animal, you're paying to the maximum weight of the animal. So what we're saying is, the first thing is what happens if we've got two oxen and they go into charge at each other. They go and ram and they go and charge at each other. Now, each one causes damage to each other. One is a muad, one is a tam, or let's say they're both tam. How would you work out the damage, Kevin?
Depends where it happened.
Okay, but we learned that for carrying damage, it doesn't matter if it's in the public domain or basically, it doesn't matter if it's in the public domain or if it's in the damaged party's domain. There would still have to be some sort of a calculation for carrying. So let's say it doesn't depend where it's happening in carrying. How would you work it out? Just give me a principle.
It doesn't just generally without carrying and word and in normal circumstances.
No, I'm saying two oxen are charging at each other and they both cause each other damage. What would be the first thing you would do?
You assess the damage of either.
Of either? Or both?
Of the damage, well, you got to know who you said. The one that did most of the damage, I mean, the majority of the damage will obviously be liable, the owner will be liable for more. If you're saying they both sustain damage.
No, they both sustain damage. They both charged at each other and they both sustain damage, yeah.
Well, then it's not, there's no damage, you can't, if it was a mutual thing, by both oxen.
Can I try?
Just let him finish,
right? I would say no damage. No
okay.
Damage to anyone.
So Kevin's opinion is no damage. Before you get there, because I know you do your homework, ask Gavin, what is your guess? So Kevin's guess is that the one damage is offset by the other, so that there's no damage. Both parties have been hurt. What's your guess, Gav? I can't hear you, Gav. You're on mute.
Sorry. Okay, so my first thing would be are any of the oxen moored? That's number one. If any of the oxen are moored, then they only pay half. If none of the oxen are moored, then they pay full.
If any of them are moored, you only pay half.
You only pay half.
Okay.
And if your carcass is the lesser value, then you only pay up to the value of your carcass.
Okay, so
that's if it's moored. If one of them are moored. Or if both of them are moored. Both of them will pay.
No, moored is full damages from your choice property. It's not half damages. That's tam.
No, I'm saying both of those oxen could be tam. We don't know.
No, but you just said, everybody will agree. You just said, if the ox is moored, you pay half. Did you mean tam?
No. If the ox is tam, you pay half.
But you said moored. Did you mean tam?
No, I meant tam then. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. Okay. So what did you pay again if the ox is tam?
So firstly, both oxes could be tam. In which case, if they're both tam, they only pay the gufa of their, either they pay half or they pay up to the value of their gufa.
But you pay each other, do they cancel each other out? How do you?
No, there's no cancelling each other out. So what you need to do is you need to, let's say they're both muad.
Yeah.
Then in that particular case, you got to work out exactly what the damage of the carcass is at that point in time. Because it starts decaying, or both of them, because they're both damaged.
No, so they injured each other and they didn't kill each other.
Even if they damage each other. So you got to work out the damage.
No. They didn't kill each other. They didn't kill each other. They didn't kill each other.
They didn't kill each other at all.
No, they
you still have to work. So you still have to work out the monetary value of each one.
Good. Yeah, Art? Good. Yeah?
No, I was just thinking you'd work out which one was tam and which one was muad. If one is, if both of them on tam, okay, then obviously they cancel each other. And if both are muad, they'll cancel. But if one is tam and one is not, the one that is muad pays the thing and not the one that is tam. That's what I think.
Okay. So the thing of it is you all, Gavin's got some valid points. Arthur's got some valid points. Kevin, it's not quite worked like that, the way you thought. And the reason being is that's why we're coming to learn this, to show it's a chiddush. Meaning your logic would have made sense. You damaged me, I damage you. We shake hands as friends and we go our separate ways. They damaged each other. So that isn't done like that because it's not a fair system. That was the only way it could have been done in the olden days because there wasn't a proper law system. What is one of the 7 Noahide laws that you set up courts of? Law. It's one of the 7 Noahide laws. The reason being is otherwise you'd end up with South Africa. Okay. Now, really, yeah, somebody that's twice your size hits your car, you ask him for insurance, he's going to hit you with a Kabb carry. You will see stars. This is anarchy here. This is absolute anarchy and chaos here. So, Kevin, exactly that. Is that there's a principle we're learning here. When we're saying in the Gemara that you deal with the monetary assessment, what we are saying is here, is we're saying a very, very straightforward principle, is that it's not vague, is that we have to work out, whether it's 2 oxes that are damaging each other in a case of Keren where they both gore each other, or a garment and a cow, etc. It's the same principle. So this is the Mishnah where we learn an assessment is done for each item. So there was a case that was brought is what happens if a garment damaged an ox? What happens if an ox trampled on a garment in that particular case? And how does a garment damage an ox? Is an ox trips on it and breaks its leg. Does that make sense? It gets entangled in it. And then what you would generally think as a principle of what would happen in the old days is if my horse was damaged, let's not use horses. Horses are docile. If my animal, my ox damaged your ox, in the old days, the bigger person would just turn around and say, well, you caused me damage. I'm confiscating your ox now. That's generally how society would work. So what we're saying here, Kevin, is as follows, is we have to work out the damage, whether it's 2 oxen that are goring each other and causing injury. We look at the damage of each one separately. Then we ask a question, is it tam or muad? That's your second question. Then we say, what is the difference between the damage of A and B? Is there a difference? And which party pays the difference? Does that
I thought you said general, but I thought you weren't taking into account tam and muad, but just generally with
No. I'm saying something separate. I'm saying something separate. I'm saying there are generally 3 criteria that you use. Let's just take Keren damage specifically. The first criteria you use is biblically. Is one responsible for full payment from the choice of property? And when we say from the choices of property, we learned the choices of property because he can convert it to cash quickly. So do you pay full payment? And is it from choice property? That's the first consideration. Or is it a case where there's leniencies, either from the gufa of the animal, or if it's half payment with tam? So we take into account stringencies and leniencies. Those are one of the factors. And we take this to account for each animal. Why for each animal? Because one might be muad and the other one might be tam. That's number one. Number two, before we even calculate whether its status is a tam or muad, full damages, half damages, etc., we have to determine amount of damage for each ox. Meaning, we can have a case where the one sustains more than the other. So once we calculate each one, the one party might have to pay a difference to the other party. In terms of how much they pay, we then take that second criteria into account, whether the damaging animal is tam or muad. Does that make sense? So I'm saying exact calculations are worked out here to a T, so that nobody is out of pocket. And we learn here that the courts enforce these things because then the big guy can't take from the smaller guy. There's no anarchy. So what we learn is we're learning a case of if a cow damaged a garment. So say there's a fur coat there, and a fur coat, a cow trampled on a fur coat, right? He went to and it damaged the fur coat. The person might say that the fur coat was worth a lot of money to me. I'm confiscating your ox in lieu of payment. That's how old-fashioned society worked in a lawless society. And he'd take your ox, especially if he was bigger than you. What could you do? Or, but there's a heck of a difference between a fur coat and a rain jacket. So it's not the end of the world if it's a puny dog and it tramples on a fur coat, ruins it, and you get a puny dog in response, because it doesn't cover the fur coat. So in that case, you've managed to be lucky. But what happens if it's a worthless raincoat from Diskin or whatever it is, and your ox tramples on it? Suddenly the guy's got a 4,000 Rand ox for a 20 Rand raincoat. So we say it can't be fair. Either way, somebody gets to lose here. So what we do is we have to calculate the damage that each one caused. And the final case is, instead of an ox that damages a garment or an garment that damages an ox, it says, what if they damaged each other? Meaning, a garment was left out and the ox trampled and broke its leg. In the old days, if horses broke their legs, you'd have to shoot them. So could the animal recover? Is it just medical damages, or do you have to put a bullet in the animal? Because an animal couldn't survive off the broken leg. They do that with horses. And then you've got to say, well, what is the cost of the garment worth? Because the garment was destroyed when the cow landed on it. And you also got to determine maybe whose fault it is. Let me give you an example of whose fault. So, for example, it's very rare to have a case where both the oxen can cause it. Let me give you an example. So the damaged party is not simply giving the damaging object without regard for whether it is worth more or less than the actual damage. Rather, the amount of the damage is assessed and the damager pays that amount. That's what Rashi said, exactly that. So you're not just swapping objects or confiscating objects. Now, if you have a look here, the initial interpretation is that, say, for example, in a tam ox, that you've caused me, your ox has damaged my ox, and you've caused me 20 zuz worth of damage. Can I confiscate your ox? Yes or no?
No.
Why?
Because it's tam. It's only worth half the value, and maybe the value of the carcass.
No, Kabb, that's not the reason. The reason is as follows: is that if you got 20 zuz,
also the damage might be a lower amount.
Correct. So that's the right answer. So in other words, number one, you assess the damage of each party. Number two, you once you've made the assessment, if you're paying on the gufa of the animal with tam, and that tam, say for example, I cause you I caused you 80 zuz worth of damage. And my tam ox means I pay half payment damage. Okay, so I've caused you 80 zuz worth of damage. I only owe you for 40 zuz. Is that correct? It's tam.
Yeah.
I owe you 40 zuz. Now you want to confiscate my ox, but my ox is worth 120 zuz. You can't just confiscate my ox. I have two oxes. Either I give you the 40 zuz, okay, or I sell my ox for the 120 zuz. I keep 80 zuz, and I give you your 40 zuz. It's obvious.
Yeah.
You don't just get the gufa of my animal. You get the gufa of my animal when my animal matches your value or is less. So, for example, if I cost you 200 zuz worth of damage, if I cost you 200 zuz worth of damage and your ox was worth 400 zuz, and if I cost you 200 zuz and it's a tam, I only owe you 100 zuz, and my ox is worth 100 zuz, I can give you my ox. You take from the gufa because that's fair. But if it's 105 zuz, you're only entitled to 100. You'd either have to give me the 5 zuz back, or I'd sell the animal and give you your 100 zuz. But if the gufa of my animal is only worth, for example, 80 zuz, and I owed you 100 because it's a tam on the 200 zuz damage, then I only give you up to the value of my animal. Okay, we're going to end off on this note here. Does that make sense, guys?
Thanks, Darius.
All right.
Perfect. Thanks, Damon.
Sure, guys. Sure.
Cheers, guys.